Today, I wanted to talk about customer identity and resolving customer identity across data sets. And really, why is customer ID important and why do organizations need to get it right? So if you look at customer ID, when we all engage with organizations, we expect our interactions to be not only consistent, but as we go and talk to whether it's sales, service, and marketing, we expect them to share information and know all the interactions that we've had with them. Often, especially these days, we start in one channel in terms of we do research in one channel, we move our sales to another channel, and then ultimately we may be fulfilled in a different channel. And there's a need for for organizations to actually understand customer identity across all those various touch points. And as consumers, at least more than half of us feel as though the offers that we get should be personalized. It should not be just an email blast that goes out. It should be something that's very targeted, to you as an individual based on your likes and your preferences and your lifestyle. Ultimately, we as customers, we want to be understood. We don't want to be treated like numbers, like client IDs or usernames. We want the organizations to know who we are. And ultimately, we want organizations and the companies we work with to have empathy. So whether we need to cancel our hotel reservation after the deadline or return a product after it's due, we want there to be some level of empathy, especially taking into account the value that we have as customers. Now, moving on, in terms of why is it difficult for organizations to get this right? When it comes to the customer ID space, there are multiple customer IDs that are there within an organization across multiple systems. Some of them are static and some of them change over time. And if you look at a lot of organizations don't know which customers they can target online. On the website they may know, but they may not know across the different ad networks, whether that be Google or Adobe or even Amazon, who is available to them, which one of their customers are on those platforms or on those ad networks that they can then engage. And especially in the era of multi-device, multi-channel, there's complexities in figuring out IDs as customers traverse and going from their iPhone to iPad to laptop to really understand that end-to-end picture. And ultimately, customer privacy is a big piece to this. There are various different legislations across the world. In the US, it's different between different states, and there's a need to have the right technology that's able to manage and support the evolving customer privacy landscape. Now, when we ask the question around who's ultimately responsible for customer ID resolution, it's somewhat similar to when you ask, who's responsible for customer. Like there's multiple parts of the organization that are responsible for customer, and there's multiple parts of the organizations that are ultimately responsible for customer ID resolution. From a marketing perspective, marketing is probably the most vested in terms of they need to understand the customer before they can target effectively and send personalized offers. But marketing lacks the technology know-how to be able to bring the data together. And then on the IT side, while IT may have the tools needed to do the job, there really is, there's a need to provide the right level of functional and business area understanding in terms of how all that customer data can be brought together. And then from an analytics perspective, analytics definitely has ownership, but the way that the analytics team usually look at it is usually use case by use case. So they may consolidate identity for a particular use case, but not often solve that issue for the overall enterprise. And then from a customer-facing staff perspective, there's always within an organization, the customer-facing staff, whether it be sales or service, they have a responsibility to make sure that they're validating the customer, they're getting the most current information, and they're fixing your data, consolidating records where it makes sense, and merging contacts, etc. So really, a lot of different departments are involved in the customer identity resolution process, and it really needs to be an enterprise effort in order to gain traction. Now, in terms of, another reason for why it's hard, customers now have a multitude of ways that they can engage an organization. And if you look at the organization is providing many, many ways for customers to engage with them. Often it's various systems that are not always connected. They have their standalone, whether they be on cloud or on-prem, but they don't really share customer IDs well across the different systems. And whether it's whether it's you walking into a physical store, the company may not always know who you are. You may just come buy something, but you may never. The company may not have your identity to actually track you to like that's a transaction that you made. Or on the digital side, you may not always authenticate on the website that you're on. So in a lot of cases, a lot of the traffic is anonymous, like over 90% on a website. So it's hard to get that overall customer view unless you're tracking by more than just authenticated users. So there's really a need to bring together the physical and digital into one, and to create that integrated profile. A good example of this is like Amazon Go, with the ability for you to walk into one of the Amazon Go stores, kind of like just walk on in, authenticate, and then you're able to pick up merchandise. You have a variety of sensors that are keeping track of who you are, what you're picking up, what you're putting down, and then you're able to walk out and then have that receipt be sent to you, all linked to your payment information. So that's one example where physical and digital are coming together. But overall, there's a need to bring these two worlds together to build that unified view, and all of that is centered on getting customer identity right. Now, when we get into the specifics of physical and digital, there's a host of IDs, right? So there's the typical name, address, phone, email that we work with, but on the digital side, there's not only usernames, but there's hashed emails, there's mobile device IDs across the different ad networks. There's session IDs, cookies ID, third-party IDs, other like live, like RAMP IDs that are evolving in the space. So there's a whole host of IDs that need to be brought together so you're able to build really a connected view of all these IDs and how they come together. An interesting area is device fingerprinting. So device fingerprinting is this view that every device is unique and it can be uniquely identified. And there's a lot of information that you could collect, and some organizations are collecting from embedding JavaScript, whether that's on your mobile device or whether that's on the website, where you can really uniquely identify, perhaps not an individual at first, but really the device itself. So across all of the data points that you can capture in terms of IP address, MAC addresses, what fonts have been installed, background colors, the GPU they're using, the CPU they're using, the audio drivers that they have, you're really able to use all of those data points to say, hey, this is actually the same device that, as this other device. So it's all really using that information to bring it together to create this unique hash ID, which ultimately identifies a single device. Especially in the era of third-party cookie deprecation, where third-party cookies are effectively going away across the various browsers, there's going to be a need to look at some of these fingerprinting techniques to better identify users. As a customer, some of the web browsers are providing increasing functionality for you to be able to manage your customer privacy. So Firefox, as an example, they've rolled out the ability for you to stop this type of behavior in terms of not allowing these fingerprinting mechanisms to be used. So there's going to be this constant battle of, not customers having the ability to share what they want and nothing more. And then on the other side, you as an organization, in certain cases, depending on the business case, especially for fraud reasons, you would want to make sure that the person that's signing on and logging on to that account isn't suspicious, in which case you might have them jump through a bunch of different hoops. So there's definitely going to be more fingerprinting, but there's going to be more push on the customer privacy side to make sure that there's appropriate consent there before that happens. All right, customer ID graph, what is it? A customer ID graph is really how all of the different IDs that we talked about earlier, how they come together. And it's using that, stitching it all together, and using it in real time to personalize your content. So this could be you landing on a website and seeing, seeing the products that you're interested in versus somebody else, or it could be your mobile app experience that would be tailored. But the ID graph really allows you to access all that customer data in real time and then be able to present it back in a real-time fashion. And especially as we move towards a post-COVID world, there's a push to combine IDs together between your personal ID, you as an individual, and your kind of business ID, your B2B ID, which is you working in a specific organization having this role, and that overall hierarchy. So ID graphs are evolving to not just be you as a person, or you as a B2B customer. It's you as an overall individual, tying in the information that's out there from a personal perspective as well as the B2B perspective. And some of these are maintained by, most of these are actually maintained by third parties and vendors, but there are some organizations that are starting to maintain their own ID graphs, so that you're able to do a lot of the real-time pieces on your own as well. Now, if we move to the customer ID stack, there's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of systems that are involved in that have customer IDs. So this stems from your forward-facing, CRM systems or even websites that have all of the sales, service, marketing interactions, to your CIAM, your customer identity access management that authenticates users as they log on to your websites, to traditional master data management, where you're looking to master customer account, contact, product information, to data warehouses and data lakes, which are repositories of structured and unstructured data. Organizations are moving towards, more and more organizations are moving towards CDPs, which is really a good place to bring a lot of this data together from all these different areas, and creating their own ID graphs, as well as digital data management platforms that are bringing data together, not only from your organization, but from second and third parties and various offline sources. So again, multiple places where customer ID exists, and this overall solution that you need to put in place for customer identity has to look beyond and look at all these areas. Now, if you look at the evolution and the vendors in this space, there's a lot of features that have been built out over time. You're able to ingest and onboard a lot of this customer data. ID graphs we've talked about. There's ID graphs that get created based on that data. There's this concept of an ID that persists. So, whether you cancel the account and come back on, or whether you are in one session, remove your cookies and come back, the persistent ID will exist over time, and it's something that you can anchor on. There's a lot of matching capabilities to be able to hash records together and get to the right individual. And then increasingly, there's a focus on clean rooms, right? So this is your ability to share data with your partners, whether they be your marketing agency or whether they be another line of business, so that you can effectively share data without sharing PII data. So a lot of these features are now being built into the platforms. There's a whole host of vendors. From a Deloitte perspective, we have Deloitte Hux, which is a combination of various technologies, part of it being Snowflake. But there's a whole host of other vendors that we work with around this space to help organizations get customer ID right, both from a physical and digital perspective. I'll take a moment to talk about customer data privacy. I won't go into it in detail. This area is continually evolving. As you know, there's GDPR, there's various laws that are at the country level or even kind of continent level, and as well in the U.S. Each state, or not each state, but a number of states have come out with their own laws or are in various stages of developing those laws, and even narrowing down from that, there are different laws that exist within industries such as healthcare and financials that govern how customer data should be managed and treated and shared, and the right amount of consent that's required. At a high level, generally, before you can do a lot of customer data sharing, especially across organizations, it's shifting towards being more consent driven. So the need to be able to get customer consent to be able to do that, or to make sure that you have a legitimate business purpose to do some kind of really deep identity resolution areas, like for fraud purposes, or even for marketing. Again, some of the laws are open to interpretation. Direct marketing and marketing to your customers qualifies as a legitimate business reason for you to consolidate customer data and effectively use that customer data. But again, this is an evolving space with regulations that are at various stages, and you should really consult your local data privacy office or legal counsel to make sure you have the right laws. Next. So in terms of why customer ID is important and why it matters, it really delivers efficiency on marketing spend. If you don't understand your customers and their IDs and how they're interacting, you may be marketing to them, more times than you'd like. So there's a lot of duplication in spend across marketing that could be resolved through ID resolution, as well as making sure that you're using the right channel at the right time. There's the ability to reach new prospects. So a lot of the anonymous users that are hitting your website and you don't know who they are, there are opportunities to market to them, through different means aside from email. And beyond those prospects, also there's a whole host of other areas where you can leverage this technology to better identify different prospects, and then to use that to really unify and create that customer 360. So it by itself doesn't create the customer 360, but it is the key enabler for you to then stitch all those interactions together and to be able to create that customer 360 and effectively deliver more personalized experiences. Another benefit is around marketing attribution. So a lot of times marketers want to know, what effectively led to the sale, right? Was it a specific conversation? Was it a campaign? So being able to tie your customer data together, your event and interaction data together, really improves your ability to isolate that, this sale was a result of this campaign, a result of this interaction, or a weighted result of a whole number of interactions. And then as well as fraud detection. So really, being able to detect fraudulent activities, to track logins, account takeovers, better understanding customer ID and where customers are originating allows you to do a better job of overall fraud detection. It's also a basis for better data quality. As part of you getting customer ID right, it really improves data across the organization, and then allows that data to be used for AI, ML models, for a whole host of other reasons. But not having that foundational data quality right really limits your the ability of your models if you're not able to connect all those interactions together. And then ultimately, it puts you in a better spot to handle a lot of the privacy regulations that are slated to take into effect. So these tools provide you with the ability to support those. It's not out of the box. There are things that you need to do, but they definitely make it easier.